So welcome back to the garden, and if you saw our post earlier today, that is a picture from an early edition of a book that was called Tom Thumb's Pretty Songbook that had included the nursery rhyme Mistress Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With cockle shells and silver bells and pretty maids all in a row. So as mentioned, it was an English nursery rhyme from 1744 in Tom Thumb's Pretty Songbook. And there's historical debate on what the nursery rhyme was about. Was it about Mary, the mother of Jesus? Was it Mary, Queen of Scots? Or was it Mary, the first of England? Hopefully we'll hear more Orioles singing and cars driving by. There was an Oriole singing just a moment ago. So you've heard the expression, April showers bring May flowers. I don't know of any expression that says what May brings for June. But the rains in April did bring back some of my native flowers, including some columbine that I planted a few years ago. And I have some perennials that return, but I do get a lot of the flowers that you see in the garden, including the hanging baskets that Parker's going to insert a picture of, that I was lucky enough to get a hummingbird on the first day from Conovers at Stone Harbor Boulevard. They really have nice flowers, and then also garden vegetables that have already been started, which I take advantage of because I don't have much light above me, and in this time of the year I work a lot, so I don't have time to start things from seedling. And through the years, because of the lack of light that I get, I've learned that it's hard to grow many of the vegetables in the summertime here because I don't have enough daily light. So I've kind of converted this into an urban flower garden behind me, and when I'm out working in it, I remember my nanny, which was my father's grandmother, a lot, because in her row home in Quakertown, PA, she had a garden behind it, and it was mostly the same thing, a rocks, flower, and herb garden. And I remember that as a young boy, and you can't have that kind of garden without some parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. So here comes some garden stories from my youth that my photographer Parker is going to hear for the first time, so hopefully the camera doesn't shake too much. So speaking of Conovers, I grew up east of Elverson in Morgantown, PA, and in my teens for probably about 4 or 5 years I worked on a farm stand, about the same kind of operation as Conovers when you drive into Stone Harbor. We had 26 acres. It was just me, a guy named George Klauser, and sometimes his one son, and we raised all kinds of food. A big, variety. Instead of one big farm selling one crop, it was just about everything. And whatever we didn't raise ourselves, we would either drive to New Jersey and buy or trade, or we would go west to the Amish country, and we would buy some of their produce, and then we would also buy shoe fly pie and items like that to sell, baked goods. One of the neatest things was George's wife was named Elsie, and Elsie Klauser. So there's a good old Pennsylvania Dutch name for you. And the neat thing with her was every day for lunch, she would say what I wanted around 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I'd say, well, I'd really like to have, cauliflower soup or whatever it may be. And she'd be, Pete, go get me 2 of those, 4 of them, 3 of them. And then I would go out and get it, bring it back. And then after she made lunch, me and George would wash up, and then we would head down to the farm stand. And when people were driving home from work, then we sold them the produce, just like you see at Conovers. And it really was one of the neatest jobs I ever had, in my life. It would start off with a bike ride that on Route 23, the big ridge road. I would start off near the top. We just lived on the other side of it. And then I'd have this huge downhill run on my 10-speed and zoom and through the farmland to the bottom, down by French Creek. Took a right, rode along French Creek out to the farm. The bitch was, on the way home, I had to ride back up that hill really slow. So I definitely got a close look at the, northwestern Chester County farmland at a very slow pace on my ride home. And then once I glided over the hill, I had to coast all the way back to my parents' house. And those kind of Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn moments, in your young life are, pretty much irreplaceable. And then I'd get back to my parents' house, And my dad had a huge garden. Now, he didn't make me work, but he enjoyed doing it himself, and I just worked all day. But between the produce I brought home from the clouds and what my dad grew, definitely did not eat a lot of processed food for my first 18 years of life until I left home. It was, a lot of veggies. Uh, but I have some funny stories and some good memories from those things, which were, I remember just the other day I had bought some fish from a local guy, and we planted the fish heads in my garden, and it reminded me of a time when my dad had done that, and our must have been probably under the ground getting a little rusty there for a few days, and our coonhound got out in it and dug it all up and decided to roll around in it. Stinky dog. But my best memories of being at the Clousers farming were one time in a hot afternoon in the summer, I decided to rip a pepper plant off of a pepper plant, the pepper off the pepper plant, and then wash it off with a hose. Well, when young hot peppers grow in the beginning, they grow up, and then after a while, the weight of them pushes them down. And I forgot what row I was in, I guess, and I just bit into that thing. Well, it was a hot pepper and melted me to the ground. And I remember laying there just pouring the hose over my face. We used to have this catbird that would bother the cats on the farm, and I used to sit with an irrigation hose on the back deck and just sit and wait for it to get closer and closer to the cats, pestering it. And then when the mockingbird would get close enough, and I can't remember if it was a catbird or a mockingbird, it must have been a mockingbird, I would turn on the irrigation hose, which is about this wide, and a flow of water would come back and knock the bird head over heels. I remember planting a whole field of pumpkins for 3 or 4 days by hand, and then having a July, or June thunderstorm come through and wash it all away. Never forget being a young boy and being only 14, 15, 16 years old and having nothing but shorts or overalls and a hat on, and driving a large tractor down the highway with cars lined up behind me before I could even drive a car. I remember doing the hoe down, rows and rows of tomatoes out there with the hoe for hours on end. I remember driving a cultivator tractor where you got to drive it straight through the crops, and you have your 2 wheels and then your cultivator, and 1 inch to the left or right, and you're wiping out stuff. So I remember that concentration level probably helped me with my driving skills. I remember us running out of food down at the stand, and then George saying, we're out of this, and a couple customers need that. And I remember running with my sack and just running through the rows and just ripping stuff off, especially the corn. And those kind of things, it wasn't about the money. I was only 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. It was about the memories, and you couldn't have had a better job. So we can't come to the garden without talking about what we've been seeing and give you a report on that. And I should have mentioned it on Mother's Day. Neat thing to have talked about would have been, we do have a family of little baby squirrels that have been running around the property, which have given us a ton of entertainment. And then the big news today is our seagull is back. And what I mean by that is, late last year we had a seagull that maybe August, I guess, started showing up at our house eating our dry cat food, and it became to a point where every day he would sit on the top of the house and squawk, and then if he didn't get an answer, he would come down, stand in front of the glass door, and peck on it. So my name for him is Pecker, but he showed up today, and we'll insert a couple of pictures of him. Had some bats zipping around the yard at night when we've been sitting out here. I had my first dragonfly that I saw today. I've also had our first mosquito bites, and that's never fun. We hear a lot of birds, more than I've seen this week. I've started back to work a lot, and so I haven't had as much time to see things, but I've been hearing a lot. And the funny thing is, a lot of these birds I'm going to mention sound like you've been in a jungle, and there's a reason for that. Is a lot of them spend their winters in Central America. In fact, some of the birds that are in the U.S. that we know well spend more time in Central and South America than they actually do here. I remember being in Costa Rica one time and seeing more tanagers and rose-breasted grosbeaks in minutes than I've seen in my life up here. But the great crested flycatcher's got a really loud jungle-y type sound. And then a couple days ago I heard our first yellow-billed cuckoo. And then at night, we've been getting the whippoorwill and the chuck-will's widow. And for those of you that could get confused, it's not easy to separate, but the whippoorwill kind of goes whippoorwill, where the Chuck Wells Widow's got 4 beats, and it kind of goes Chuck Wells Widow. So that's the difference between that. And again, you can always go to Google Audio and listen for to the sounds too. Couple shout outs. My mother, and hopefully we have a picture to show you, she got her Oriole by putting an orange out like Mimi did. And then Lynn Masiri participated in the the World Series of Birding, and they did something unique this year. Usually that is a New Jersey, Cape May County thing with teams that go afield, but due to social distancing, they let people do it from their properties. Lynn was down in North Carolina, and I had heard that she was fortunate enough to see a scarlet tanager, which we'll show a picture of that, which is, probably top 5 prettiest birds in America. A couple last little things before we wish you adieu. Time to get your hummingbird feeders out, cleaned and out, and next week we'll talk about what to put in them. I've had a lot of fun with here with bribing the blue jays with peanuts, like my in-laws do at their house every day. Around dinner time, they throw peanuts out, and the blue jays are usually out there waiting for them. What I've been doing is kind of hiding them around here like an Easter egg hunt, and then seeing if they can find them. Bird baths. You'll see just as many birds come into your bird bath as you will with your feeders. So keep your bird baths filled. Try to tip them over once in a while. Put some fresh water in it to keep the mosquito larvae out of. We talked about the flowers in the baskets for the hummingbirds. And then another trick that I'll do sometimes with my herbs is let some of them go to seed where they go to flower, and then that gives the bees and the hummingbirds another option of something to get their beaks and whatnot on. And another sunny day here. Happy to have it. Sorry about all the cars driving by, despite the fact that the stay-at-home order has not been lifted. Everybody's been heading to the shore like it has been, so a lot of noise today. But I hope you enjoyed this visit to the garden, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.